There's gigs I was so upset that I wasn't on 5 years ago that don't even exist in Melbourne now. That I was like, I can't believe I'm not on there. I couldn't even tell you the name of the club now.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Howdy. Welcome. Today's guest, he's a deep thinker, very intellectual, and super funny. I've watched David perform comedy over the years, and his growth has been super impressive. We cover a lot of topics, but one that I find particularly insightful is how David has navigated deliberating panic attacks and the journey and progression he's made. It's great to hear. Okay, enough from me. Let's get into it. David Rose is a stand-up comedian, writer, performer, live event producer, and radio broadcaster. Based in Melbourne, he has toured his work across 5 countries in English and German and has opened for some of Australia's top headliners, including Dilruk, Akmal, Dave O'Neill, Fiona O'Loughlin. He's performed at the top comedy clubs in Australia. He's also written and presented 2 feature-length documentaries for ABC Radio National, numerous segments for TV's The Leak and Tonightly, and has performed at 6 consecutive Melbourne International Comedy Festivals. David is also a skilled MC and excels at hosting and performing at corporate events, fundraisers, and private functions. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about getting success too quickly and longevity, the Hawk Twa Girl and success, competition, why Luke Kitchell is a gun, control and social media, persistence, panic attacks, meeting people where they're at, lessons from a monk, busking, plus plenty more. Before we get into this epic chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny in Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out at 3:30 Melbourne, Australian time, with the full video of the podcast to be released the following day. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's get into it.
She went and saw this live podcast at the Palais. Yeah. And it was like these guys who aren't media personalities. They're just 2 dudes who started a podcast, and they got picked up by whatever the Australian radio network thing is. There's like a listener, I think listener. They got picked up by that and they put it on a show. And I went, was it good? And she went, no, it wasn't really good. And I went, will you go again? She went, probably not. All right, well that's fine. It's a cash grab. You know, but I think they know that too. They're like, we have no business being on the stage at the Palais. So we'll sell our 2,000 seats. And then probably most of those 2,000 people won't come back. And then we can do that for a couple of years. We might be able to rinse and repeat.
Oh, really? Just because they're with the brand?
Yeah, they might be able to rinse and repeat for a couple of years. But long term, like, you can't trick people into seeing something bad.
It kind of reminds me of, who's the Hawk Twa Girl?
Yeah, Hawk Twa, yeah.
And she's got her own podcast now, and she's milking fame, and she's on the biggest podcast in the world. And this is not a go at her, but she's really milking it for all it's worth.
I totally respect it.
Yeah.
I like the cynicism of like, this isn't going to last forever. So let me just...
I would do the same
strike while the iron's hot. Yeah. I think the silly thing is getting upset when you're like, you've been working really hard and you've been trying to get an audience for your podcast and you can't. And then some chick comes along and she makes a blowjob joke on TikTok and then suddenly she has a job. Why get mad at that though? Because like, you know there's no longevity there. Or maybe there is, and if there is, good for her. Maybe she figured out a way to like jump past all those, but you know, she'll live and die on her own content.
I agree with you. There's been a few examples in the podcast group pages that I'm in, And everyone's like, can you believe her or other people? They've now got all of these followers and they're growing up big. This is such an insult. And I'm like, dude, one, it doesn't actually impact you. And two, if anything, it just makes you like I strive to get better because of something like that.
Also, like most people, I think, are not like, oh, I've got a choice. I'm going to either listen to this history podcast that this guy has worked on really hard, or the TikTok blowjob girl podcast. Like, they're not choosing between you anyway.
Yeah.
Like that's something I've had to come to terms with in comedy. It took me a while to come to terms with that in comedy. I think I was a little more entitled and bratty when I started, where I was like, they're getting that, I should be getting that. But I then eventually realized, like, oh, it was never a choice between me and that person.
Brilliant.
The audience for that person is a different audience. If I'm some hot 20-year-old girl playing the ukulele, I'm not taking audience members away from a guy like me who's a 30-year-old white guy doing dark jokes in a comedy club.
Yeah.
They are different audiences. So to get mad that she's been given an opportunity that I'm like, oh, I could have had that. Yeah, but why would I was never in the running for that opportunity.
I don't think you realize how rare this is. So many people, and I think I've been guilty of this, especially comedy, stand-up comedy in Australia, it's a small community. It's so easy to go, and I'm sure you do it and you've got a journey there. Oh, this person got that role, I should have got it, and that's natural. But to realize that, at the end of the day, with your mindset, I'd love to know the journey. Was there suffering and pain involved? Oh, you got to smile, so what?
I think that it just comes from entitlement. I think anyone in entertainment, but especially comedy, is like inherently a narcissist. And so you're like, it should be me all the time. Everyone should be looking at me constantly. I should be other. But there's not always an audience for you at the time, like at the right time as well. And when you think you're ready for something, sometimes you're not as well. So I don't mind it I used to really want everything immediately.
Yeah.
That instant gratification of like, oh, I had a good gig, so every good gig should be a good gig and I should just do better and better gigs every time. But that's not how the world works, and it's not even really how it should work. Progress should be slow.
Yeah. And
it actually should be, I think, so incremental that you don't even realize you're getting better.
Interesting.
Until there's an exponential leap.
Yep.
And then you go, wow, I'm a lot better than I was then. And those opportunities I thought I was ready for, turns out I'm not ready for, or I wasn't ready for then and I am now. Meanwhile, the people that got them at that point either sank or swam.
Sure. And
the opportunities either still exist or disappeared along with that other person, Like there's gigs I was so upset that I wasn't on 5 years ago that don't even exist in Melbourne now. That I was like, I can't believe I'm not on there. I couldn't even tell you the name of the club now. Like, that's just how it is.
It sounds like you've done a lot of, and we can get into it, I know you've done a lot of like self-introspection stuff, but you have a pretty good relationship with your ego and realizing, we're all children at different levels, but not getting the role, having that tantrum, and then being like, you know what, not for me.
You know what I would say? I think I threw the tantrums for a while.
I think it's very healthy.
I remember like getting in trouble once with a booker because I went, can I get a gig? And he goes, no, I don't have anything. And I go, well, you've got this guy on and I'm as good as him. And you know what that booker did? He screenshotted it and he sent it around to a bunch of comedians. And then I just got shit from people for like years. People would be like, hey, that guy's on the show. You're as good as him. And you know what? In retrospect, it was a great experience because it taught me a lesson about entitlement. And I don't think I would have learned it otherwise. I mean, I think I would have anyway, but like, I've always been the kind of person that just wants to put my head down and continue working.
Yeah.
But I know that from an outside perspective, what that looks like is arrogance and entitlement. Because if you're like, I'm just going to keep asking for gigs, I'm going to keep trying to do as many gigs as possible, I'm going to keep pestering people for opportunities so I can get better. What that looks like is me. Why aren't you giving me things?
That's interesting. In America, I think it works a bit differently.
It does, yeah.
I had Monty Franklin on, and he was saying everyone in America just asks all the time, and it's common.
You
go on.
It's hustling. Like, okay, so I went to, it now doesn't exist, but Caroline's was a big comedy club in New York, and I went in, And I went, hey, I'm a comedian from Australia. And they went, all right. And I went, can I get on? And they went, no, there's like a process. And I went, I'm here for a month. I don't really have time for that. I've been doing it 7 years. Can I just get on? And they went, all right. And pulled me on, and I did great. And then they went, do you want to come back? And I went, sure.
Oh,
And
nice.
then did a few gigs, and then they said, next time you're here, we'll get you on the headline. We'll try and get you a visa, all this stuff. And then I got on a plane and I flew back to Australia, and I opened up Instagram, and the Booker for Caroline's, I had on his story, hey, does anyone have a job? Caroline's is just... Which is, that's entertainment in a nutshell.
Oh my
You're
goodness.
like, oh, I'm going to be a star. Oh, it's gone.
Were you thinking I'm going to move to America?
Yeah, I'm like, this is it. This is the break.
Was that the moment?
Not really. I mean, I have a philosophy of now, it's not happening till it's happening. That's my thing with, like, you saw me at opening for Moddy, the great American comedian. My girlfriend was like, you excited? I was like, this gig is not happening till I'm on stage telling jokes.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it just, there's just so many times where you're like, it's happening.
I briefly spoke to you about this off air. Almost getting that TV developmental deal. That was what it was called technically. And I was racing ahead. 3 seasons of Netflix. We hadn't even discussed it will be on Netflix.
Yeah.
My life, I'm going to live 6 months in America, 6 months here. I'm going to miss the winter. I was projecting. This went on maybe for 8 months. Lawyers involved. And I thought it was a big break.
It's like sex. You're not actually coming until you come.
Till it's
You can be like, I'm about to come. But am I actually,
Yeah.
you learn that very quickly, I think, in entertainment, is that there are no opportunities until the money's in my pocket, even.
Well, that, I'm sure you've had gigs where payment might not come in quite on time. But...
Yeah, you just have to temper your expectations. But is that such a bad thing? It's like going on a date and being like, oh, we're going to have kids, we're going to fall in love, we're going to, and then she goes, yeah, I wasn't really feeling it, I don't want a second date. And you go, I just lost my wife.
I left everything for you.
You never had it, so why worry about it?
I agree. So I also learned a similar lesson to you, like what is for you is for you, and if it's not the right people, you'll find the right people. Same with what you're saying with comedy. Someone listening to a girl talking about like blowjobs might not necessarily be interested in your comedy. It's still a very tough pill to swallow, but once you kind of like get it, and I'm sure I'll go backwards and forwards, and that's the nature of
That's
life.
actually the name of the blowjob show, by the way, Tough Pill to Swallow.
Is it actually?
No. Just trying to make a blowjob. Anyway, what were you saying?
That's good. But it's a difficult pill to swallow, and to realize that you're not for everyone and that you're still okay.
Yeah. Well, here's something I'm struggling with at the moment, is that I believe that comedy and art in general should be countercultural, because comedy comes from tension, and it comes from a clash of two contradictory ideas coming together.
Yeah.
And that's normally where the humor comes from, a release of like, oh, that was unexpected.
Yeah.
So my view is that if everyone is saying to the audience things that the audience expect, it's not very good comedy.
Yeah.
Because it's just parroting the audience's views back to them, which is fine, but it's not, in my view, particularly interesting comedy.
Yeah.
So we now exist in a situation, especially in Melbourne, where everyone is very left-wing. And the interesting thing is I am also very left-wing. I vote the same way that all these people vote. I believe roughly, with enough room for individual opinion to enter into it, I believe roughly everything everyone else in the Melbourne comedy scene believes. When I'm on stage, I occupy, I think, what seems like a more conservative right-wing persona, because that is currently countercultural.
Interesting.
So, and I think that there is not enough understanding in the comedy scene in Australia, especially, of the value of a counter narrative, that I think I'm being mistaken by other comedians for actually being like conservative. But I just think it's funnier to make the audience feel tension and then release it by saying things like, my favorite thing to do right now is to say a thing that is true, that we all agree is true, but people aren't saying.
Yes.
So like, here's an example. There's a joke I really liked saying where I go, I'm from Melbourne, which means I'm very pro-Indigenous rights, and then I go to Perth and I see them and I lock my car. Right?
Yeah,
Now that's a joke based on, literally based on
That's
being in
perfect,
Perth, seeing some very left-wing comedians from Melbourne, see some Indigenous people on the street and cross the road out of fear. And yet these are the same people that wear the always was, always will be shirts and vote for, The point of that joke is like, here's a thing we all actually know. We all actually know it, but none of us are saying it. And that's where the comedy comes from. No one is saying it, therefore there's tension built into it. If we were the other way around, if it was 1980 and everyone was Rodney Rude and, just drinking beer and being boring straight white man comedy, I would probably be more far to the left, preachy persona on stage, because that would be countercultural.
I like that. You put the comedy first. That's very brave, especially in Melbourne.
Right, it's not doing me many favours.
I disagree, but...
Because I think that I'm giving the impression, even my sister's very left-wing. And then the silly thing, I shouldn't even have to say my sister's very left-wing because it makes me sound like I'm not.
Yeah.
My sister and I, literally, in every major, social, environmental, whatever issue, we agree with each other. But she says to me, your material is like alt-right.
That's alt-right.
And I'm like, it's not alt-right, it's funny.
Right? I don't look through the lens of left or right. That doesn't make sense to me. But when you're doing comedy and to be able to, you're tackling whatever the issue or the topic and to go out with the comedy blinkers first.
Well, what are we doing? If we're not looking at comedy with comedy first, then what are we doing?
I agree. Otherwise they're TED Talks, some of them.
Well, it's just, you're not creating art for the sake of the art. You're creating art for the sake of your friends or whatever. What's the point of pursuing an art form if you're not trying to perfect the art form, right?
I agree. But then, for example, a lot of fear can come in, and we see so many comedians all around the world, but let's talk about Australia, that might say a joke which isn't even that funny, but they think they'll be seen in a certain light.
Clapter, It's not laughter and it's not clapping. It's
yes.
Yath clapping.
Yeah. You go down.
Fucking boring.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's really boring, and it's more interesting to say. It's just more interesting to find a little crack and to try and push it open.
So tell me more about this, because I think that's very unique, and given your political alignments, to then show the world potentially that you're not of that political way of thinking. That can be very scary, because from what it appears, and this is not a comment on left or right, I do not care about that stuff, that if you are more right in, for example, in Melbourne, you won't potentially get as many gigs as someone. Yeah.
Okay, here's a joke I wrote the other day. Now, this joke won't make sense if you're not from Melbourne.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this, you need to know in Melbourne we have a thing called a hook turn, which is where you drive up and it's, instead of turning right at a green light, like waiting for the traffic to go right, you drive up on the left, you stay in the far left lane until the light goes amber or red, and then you turn with the traffic to the right. Yeah. So you turn that lane on your left to the right. Have I explained that well enough?
Yeah.
Okay, here's the joke. The joke is, I recently learned about intersectional politics.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of it before because I'm a white man and I didn't need
it. Yeah.
So that's joke one.
Yeah.
That's obviously an ironic statement.
Yeah.
Everyone needs intersectional politics. But that's not funny to go, but everyone actually needs intersectional politics.
Yeah.
This is a joke.
Yeah.
It's funnier to just be belligerent and annoying. Right, so that's the joke. I heard about intersectional politics. We don't have it in Melbourne. I didn't need it because I'm a white man. I've recently found out we don't have it in Melbourne. We don't have intersectional politics. We have hook turn politics.
Yeah.
That's where even if you wanted to go to the right, you have to pretend you're far to the left.
Yeah.
That's literally a joke about traffic. That joke is, if you want to go to the right, in a hook turn, you have to be to the left. It's also, by the way, a joke about even right-wing people in Melbourne are pretty left-wing.
Yeah.
Now, I've had multiple people tell me that joke is pandering to the right, is alt-right, or is giving conservatism like a foothold in comedy. I'm like, what are you talking about?
So how do you cope with that? Because once again, I just see it as labels, and how I address things, and we won't get into the politics of things, is I just look at an issue and I don't, if it's a left, if it's a right, I don't go, oh, because this person said it, I have to agree with that. I really hate that way of thinking. That doesn't work for me. And we all do it to various degrees. I obviously do it for some other topics. But wouldn't that drive you nuts? You're just saying a very good joke, you've explained the dynamics behind it. It's very clever, there's layers, and then you can't please everyone.
You can't please everyone, but you also can't please anyone. That's the other thing. Is that like I've tried the other way of being like very like inoffensive and acceptable to everybody, and trying to do the comedy rooms that would get me the opportunities with the power brokers. That didn't work either, because I wasn't what they were looking for. Which, by the way, is fine.
Yep.
I have no problem with being overlooked. I actually don't. I think it's awesome that you're giving people opportunities that were previously overlooked. Whether you're successful in sticking the landing on that is another issue.
Yep.
But I think it's cool that you're trying. But once I realized, like, oh, saying the things they want me to say is not going to get me where I want. Saying the things I want to say is probably not going to get me where I want. So fuck it, I might as well say the things I want to say. It's going to be the same outcome anyway.
I agree, and there'll just be other avenues for you to succeed.
But I also don't want to be viewed as a conservative person, because I'm not.
Yeah.
But I do want to find tension and exploit it for laughs, because that's the job.
Yep.
And I don't see much tension in the cultural left at the moment, because it is actually quite a homogenous block of ideas. Like it's not funny. It's not funny for everyone to be like, the planet's burning. Oh no.
Anyway, that's
and
my
fossil
time.
fuels.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing funny there.
Yeah.
I have a joke where I go, left-wing people hate fossil fuels, but they also hate Captain Cook, and he was carbon neutral. Now that's obviously not a pro Captain Cook joke.
I don't see that as a political joke in the slightest.
Yeah, well, you're not in the Melbourne comedy scene. But you know what? It sounds like I'm griping, and I'm really not. I think there's room for these discussions, and I think it's actually really admirable. It's admirable how much we've changed socially. Like, I remember 10 years ago, the first joke I ever did that got a round of applause, in retrospect, was a heinous anti-trans joke. It wasn't that heinous, but the joke was, my neighbour identifies as a boy now, but they were born a girl, so for Christmas I got them a dog, but it's actually a cat, right? It's not a good joke. But 10 years ago in Melbourne, that got a round of applause. Now...
Round of applause?
Yeah, round of applause. Now, people will be like, what are you talking about? That's like not how being trans works. It's an offensive stereotype.
I don't like how that thinks, but yes.
And they would be totally correct. And I wouldn't tell that joke now, because I don't think it's insightful or funny, or really has anything going for it except basically just being uneducated bigotry.
Yes. And the way that you approach your jokes is of a higher level, and the different layers and all of that stuff.
But I told that joke 10 years ago when I didn't know anything about anything. I was, 20.
Yeah.
So I can forgive myself for being an idiotic 20-year-old.
But regardless of comedy or not, we all, let's say, I'm not calling this a mistake, but we all make mistakes. We all grow. We're 20 years old.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would call it a mistake, but it's also like, how do you learn if not by making mistakes?
Exactly.
And what's interesting is the audience at that time didn't consider it a mistake.
Yeah.
But we've all learned and we've all grown, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and isn't that fantastic to look back on an experience like that and go, not a joke I would do now, and I've grown, I've evolved, my comedy's...
But also we've grown as a society. Not only have I grown, the audience has grown.
Yeah.
What I think is intriguing is that I think the audience is still a step ahead of the culture in the Australian arts, where the Australian arts has an idea that there are certain things that you must not say, there are certain ways you must not behave, because that will alienate people.
Yeah.
But what they're actually talking about is industry stuff. They're talking about alienating other people in the industry, making the gig feel like it's not a safe place for other people who want to perform. Whereas the audience are like, hey, I like that. The Australian audience, it turns out, is just like everyone else. They hear something funny, they laugh at it.
And if they don't?
If they don't, they don't.
Exactly. Kind of on this topic, you're talking about, and I agree that, some opportunities will be presented to you and some won't, for the various degrees we've discussed. And I've spoken about it a little bit, and I'm sure he won't appreciate it, but Luke Kidgel. I think he's hilarious. I had a great chat with him. I think his comedy's really funny. And I don't believe he does anything political, but I've seen his clips and I think he's extremely funny. And he's also someone that hasn't, I'm not sure that he's had as many opportunities, or maybe he turns them down. I don't know, in the Australian landscape. You've got a smile, so
No, finish what you're saying and I'll tell you a funny story.
Okay. I just look at someone like him and I think he's brilliant and he knows his audience, but he hasn't potentially had the Australian opportunities and experience, and he's gone down his own path.
And Luke's a great example of the audience ultimately being the ultimate arbiter.
Yeah.
Because Luke is on paper a person that no one currently in the Australian media landscape would be very interested in. He's a white, he literally has I think his show was called the whitest guy ever or something he is like a white heterosexual man. He could not be more cut and paste like every other white man that exists. But he's really funny.
Yeah.
And his crowds love him.
Yeah.
And he's developed an audience because it turns out that if you're really funny, even if you don't tick the right boxes, people will come. People will come see you.
And I don't say this from like a white perspective, but what I'm saying is that potentially the opportunities didn't come his way, so he pivoted.
Yeah, and I'm also not saying that only people who tick the right boxes are getting an opportunity. And it's a tricky tightrope to walk on, because I think it's great that people are being offered opportunities that were previously denied them.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can speedrun it. We were talking about this off air. Like, I don't think you can take someone who was previously disadvantaged, give them all the opportunities in the world, and then create a career for them out of whole cloth. They have to get there on their own.
Yeah.
And you can't just put someone from the bottom to the top and expect them to do well. It's unfair to them, and it's unfair to everybody. It's unfair to them because they will not do well. And then the audience, it's unfair to, because they've been exposed to something not very good. And then they will mistakenly say, oh, well, I guess people like that aren't very good.
I get you.
Which is unfair, because it's not that person's fault for having been put up higher than they need to be right now. They probably needed to be in the middle, but they've been put at on television or whatever it is, or hosting a show. And it's unfair all around. So
essentially, regardless of who the person is, there is, we talked about incremental improvements. Doesn't matter, I gave you the example as a chef, that if you just become a head chef after 1 year, you potentially putting that person, you send them up to fail.
Yes, putting that person up to fail, you're putting the business up to fail, and the customers are going to have salmonella poisoning. Everyone has a bad time, except the people in the positions who are making decisions, who then go, well, hey, look, I deserve a raise because I put that person there, and we all agree that I ticked the right box. So the box ticking is the problem, not the people who have fit in the box. It's the fact that there is a box to begin with.
Yeah.
The fact that we didn't organically decide, hey, why don't we open this up to more people? The fact that it was such a closed system that we then had to go, oh, how do we fix this? All right, let's create a quota.
Yeah.
And then let's fill it. But we're trying to do it too quickly. We're trying to jump over years and years of neglecting people, and by giving them huge opportunities immediately. So it's a bad idea.
That's a very interesting perspective.
It's kind of like economic development. The only place that really managed to do it was like Singapore. Singapore went from being like a destitute country to one of the greatest countries in the planet, GDP, quality of life, all that stuff. But they got really lucky. They had Lee Kuan Yew. They had one of the best leaders of all time in charge, and he just knew how to do it. Most people don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
You will occasionally get lucky and find someone who's incredibly talented and can take that opportunity and run with it. Mostly you're not going to find that, though.
It's a very interesting, I'm just playing around with my head. The system, as in it's all well-intentioned, it's all great, but a system where we can thrive together, regardless of who you are and what it is. But throwing people in the deep end, that can be a challenge for most people. And that's also a really interesting perspective. Then you do have and hopefully it's a small amount of people going, well, then those people, they suck. And it's not about that. The whole idea is that, it can be counter.
I think it comes from, and look, it's an attempted solution to a problem which has been Australia has been incredibly bad at assimilating non-white heterosexual people into the entertainment industry. I'm only speaking about entertainment because it's the only thing I know.
Yeah.
It's like I've been to TV networks and you walk down a hallway, there's a network here in Melbourne, and in their hallway they have pictures of all their anchors from decades gone by. And you're like, what is this, a Nazi hallway? Why is this so white? Why is everyone white and blonde? It's weird. Why is this is so creepy.
No, that's hilarious.
But because we totally neglected that, we are trying to fix it, in my opinion, in a way that does not service anybody but the people who are using it to burnish their own career by showing how progressive they are by having put these voices forward.
Yeah, without potentially, I don't know enough of this, potentially a system in place to help individuals thrive instead of necessarily throwing the deep end without support systems.
And by the way, I also don't believe that necessarily I would be a better choice, for example. But I think there are better choices out there for some things that are being created that money could have been used elsewhere. You could have commissioned a different project, and instead of making the people that were the stars of the ones you have commissioned, maybe make them writers. Let them get the opportunity of learning how to be in a writer's room, and then give them a show.
Yeah.
But we want to jump straight to giving them a show.
That's a very interesting perspective. I haven't had anyone spell it out like that.
Yeah, because everyone's terrified.
Yeah. Well, good on you.
Well, before we do all this, let me go back and tell you my fun story about Luke Kidgel. Because I think it's such a great moment in my life that I'm like, where you think you're the main character and it turns out you're a side character?
Yeah. Awesome.
So I'm in St. Kilda.
I haven't had that yet, but...
I'm in St. Kilda one day. This is years and years and years. Luke had just, from what I understand of his career, had kind of just started doing stand-up properly. He was a YouTube guy and he was doing stand-up, and I'm in St. Kilda. Luke's the nicest guy ever.
Yeah.
He drove past me and he saw me and he goes, "Hey, David." And I met him twice. And I'm like, "Hey, man." He goes, "Where are you going?" I went, "Oh, I'm waiting for a tram to go in the city." He goes, "Get in the car, I'll drive you." So nice. And I get in the car and I'm like, "Why are you wet? He was dripping wet." And he goes, "Oh yeah, man, Pokemon Go has just come out." And I just filmed a sketch of me finding a Magikarp off St. Kilda Pier, and I just run off the pier and get the Magikarp. That's the joke, because he's so keen to get the Pokemon, he doesn't realise. And I remember thinking oh, that's so cringeworthy, that's so embarrassing that you're making little sketches online about pop culture, and I was like, oh, all right, mate, well, that's cute.
Good luck to you, yeah.
But I'm going to go work on my tight 5 minutes about, bread or whatever. I for years thought that was a story of a cringy internet guy and a guy who was trying to do real stand-up. Turns out it was actually a story about an idiot who thought that making content on the internet was for idiots, and a guy who was really attuned to the cultural moment and was working really hard.
Brilliant, and attuned is a great word. And it's very impressive for you to bring that up also on air as well. You think you're the hero in the story, and not that you're the villain, but that nice switch, because we've had so many people in this podcast say, "Oh, look at people do their sketches," and they realize, no, this is also another way to thrive in your own niche. I mean,
in retrospect, and even now, I'm so impressed by Luke's ability I think attuned is the right word, because he's so intuitive with the internet in a way that I'm not. He just seems to have this inherent understanding of online dynamics and how people interact with one another, and the kind of content that might go well, and the kind of content he wants to create happens to be in that cultural moment as well, perfectly aligned. I'm very uncomfortable with the internet. I don't like it.
Go on.
It scares me. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy any of it.
Scaring types of fear of something, or you don't know what?
It's like a wave. It's out of your control. It's being controlled by factors that are so external to you.
Gotcha.
I don't like going viral. Every time a video gets millions of views, I'm like, oh fuck, here we go again. I don't enjoy it. It's stressful. because you don't know what people are going to say. You don't know who's sharing it to who.
But is it also like pressure?
It's not pressure. It's the lack of control and lack of knowing how it's going to be taken by other people. And then there's the comment section as well, which is a whole different thing. You know, I've been on the internet long enough to not really care about comments that much.
Yeah.
But it's also it's an untamed. It's like pure, to use the Freudian term, like id. It's pure desire and base instinct on a global scale. And people are their worst selves on the internet, as we all know. When Matt Rife started blowing up on TikTok, I said to a friend, because on TikTok there's like a little autofill bar, and it says like, you know, the Hawk Tour girl. It'll be like, I think her name's Hayley Welsh. So like you look at a video of hers and it'll say Hawk Tour Hayley Welsh. It's just like, it fills in what it thinks you want to know about the video you're watching. And then it's just to keep you on the app. And when Matt Rife started blowing up, I said to a friend of mine, I said, I guarantee you in a year that little blue search bar will say Matt Rife allegations, because that's what everyone wants now. They want a hero, and then they want to pull him down and go, look at what he did. And almost a year later, a video comes up with Matt Rife, not even anything bad. I think it was an interview where someone said, what kind of women do you like? And he goes, I like hot women. And then a whole bunch of ugly women were like, have you heard the allegation? This is, by the way, a legal term.
I didn't expect that.
Allegations, not just Matt Rife being a dick. Allegations. And it's just
as in that was called.
This is the nature of the human experience is to be distrustful and vain and jealous of success. And Matt Rife got some success, and so the immediate response of the internet was, let's pull him down.
It's very wild. I try not to, and obviously I'm the solution to everyone's problems. I try not to look at that stuff. Like, it's very hard.
Yeah, but it's fine if you don't look at it, but we live in a society, and that does influence other people. And like every time I see something of mine go up, I'm like, okay, what is it? What's the bullshit that I'm going to have to deal with? Someone hears a joke and goes, oh my God, this joke sounds like a Bill Hicks joke from 1986. He stole it. I'm like, okay. These are just jokes that are both touch the same topic. No, I didn't steal it. If I did steal it, it's from 1986. There's only so many jokes in the world. It's probably just a reworking of a similar thing. Or, I made a joke once and it got shared by Ben Shapiro.
I heard about
that. And
that.
I got a bunch of people going, oh my God, you're on the Ben Shapiro show. You're a right-winger. You and Ben Shapiro have worked together now. You're pathetic. Screw you. It's just endless negativity, and it's vaguely traumatizing to be exposed.
In that capacity.
People think having an audience is power. It's not. It's vulnerability.
Please expand.
It's exposure. It's mass exposure. And now the audience has more power than they ever did before, especially if you're an independent artist. Because you don't have management, PR, a record company or whatever, or a touring company that has a financial interest in you and therefore will absorb some of the blows on your behalf. Now it's just direct. The great thing about the internet is it's made the artist and the consumer have a direct relationship. The worst thing it ever did was give the artist and the consumer a direct relationship. Because you are vulnerable on a world stage in a way that you've never been before. Literally one person with a smartphone can cause significant career and psychological and physical damage to you.
That's very scary to me.
Now, the flip side of this, and I can imagine people are even listening to this and thinking, okay, but that's only if you did something wrong.
Yes.
Right? Which is fair enough too. But wrong is in the eye of the beholder. And
there's also a process towards, getting that out where realizing that.
And there's a process to not having a process. It used to be due process where someone would say something and then it would get fact checked and then it would go through a series of trials or whatever, and then everyone would reach a conclusion. Now it's just, hey,
you did this.
Shoot it off, destroy a person's not only career is one thing, but like social life, social circle, all this other stuff.
Interesting.
And like, I just find that an incredibly, like, it's making me feel anxious right now even talking about it, because it's so much out of your control. And like, I don't think that I've done anything wrong, but who knows? It could be a girlfriend who comes out of the woodwork and goes, hey, he was, a piece of shit when we were dating. You just don't know.
I agree. I think you're in the clear, and first of all, I'll give you a compliment. Your comedy, I'm very impressed with your comedy, and to see the growth over the years, your composure, especially I saw you at Motti recently, and you were just very calm and present. I know it was potentially a different type of crowd to what you're used to, but just the way that you went about it so calm, it showed many years of growth, but also showed that you've been doing this for many, many years. And I really enjoyed it. Forget why I explained. Oh, there's always going to be people that don't agree with you, don't like you, and hopefully they're in a small minority. But I think as you're building up and people will see, and you're well-intentioned, everything that you've said is from high intentions. And I think that's really important. You're not going out and being like, fuck people for getting, okay.
Yeah, my cynicism, I guess, is I don't think that people care about your intentions. I think people care about themselves and about what they can get out of a situation. And again, like, it's so difficult to talk about this stuff without sounding like I'm like defensive or upset or worried about in the future something horrible that I've done coming out. I just don't like the trajectory of where we're headed as a society, where we're so willing to tear other people down for our own edification and benefit. And I unfortunately don't really think intentions do matter. Or maybe they matter long term, but it takes a while for
There might be a bit of a short term.
What did Mark Twain say? A lie can travel around the world before truth has put its pants on. And I think we live in a world like that, where you can be very justifiably scared of reputational harm, and you have a mass audience, and at any point you feel like that could be something that you have to contend with one day. Even watching what you say in the podcast, what if I said the wrong thing in this podcast? What if it gets clipped up and someone just takes the thing of me talking about what opportunities given to what people and decides to weaponize that? It's the weaponization I don't like, and I think it's because these devices have basically broken our brains and trained us to want dopamine. Someone else sees a vulnerability in another person and they go, oh, I can get a lot of likes by exploiting that.
Yep. I agree with all of that, and especially for ones in comedy, for example, that is definitely a very valid thought. And someone like, well, I used to be an accountant, that I don't need to necessarily worry about it as much.
Yeah.
What is the balance? Because I don't have the answer. What's the balance of, you still want to succeed and grow, which you're doing, and then also at the same time you're saying, you might not want to go viral because that could impact me. So how do you move forward?
Well, look, ultimately I believe, and I don't think I would even be in entertainment if I didn't think I was basically like a decent person. I don't believe there's any reason for me to be worried about that sort of stuff. And if there was, I would hope I was the kind of person that would tackle it head on. If I'd done something that would upset people, I would want to understand that. If I believed that I was in the wrong, I would want to make amends. If I didn't believe I was in the wrong, I would want to continue on. But you just, so you can't worry about that stuff. But, and unfortunately, the internet is the tool we all have now. So you just have to live with the discomfort of it, I guess. I think it's been a great thing. It's democratized entertainment. It's democratized art in a way that was never possible before. I just wish that we were all a little more conscientious, I think, is what I'm ultimately saying. I think it's been a long roundabout way of me saying I wish we all were more mindful of the way we behave with regard to other people.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I will add to it. I don't have anything profound to say. I do think intentions matter. And hopefully these situations don't happen, but there's always people that, will stand up for you in the situation. We're not putting it out to the universe, but
no, you know what?
The average person's not a moron in context, and I know you're talking about out of context, and that's fearful. But for example, the small clipping. Whenever I look at a headline from the American politicians, both sides, I will then, and I know not everyone does this, I will look at the full context and from both ends, like, this is stupid.
I think long term you're right, but I just finished reading a series of memoirs by this journalist, William L. Shirer. He wrote a book called The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and then he wrote three memoirs about being a journalist in America. He was born in 1904, he died in I think like 1989, so he basically got the whole of the 20th century, more or less.
Yep.
And he was there for some of the biggest events, like he met Hitler and Goebbels and JFK and Truman and Gandhi, like he knew these people personally. But there was 10 years in his professional life where he basically couldn't work because he was listed in a pamphlet called, I think, Red Channels that accused him of being a communist because he was liberal.
Yeah.
And back then being liberal was a bad thing and being a conservative was cool. And it's the flip side of now, where if you espouse views that sound conservative, even if you're not conservative, you can be denied opportunities or whatever.
Yep.
For him, in his time, it was liberalism. And it after 10 years, he was able to continue working. He ended up having a bestseller, and his career was fine, and his family was fine. But there was 10 years that he had to get through. That I think is human nature, and it hasn't changed. I guess maybe now, instead of 10 years, it's 10 weeks or something. you endure the wave of controversy when it hits you, and then you just continue on. I don't know.
This is going to sound so wanky, and I hope people call me out on this. And I'm, once again, not the solution, but I've also had fears in this regard. And the way that and hopefully it doesn't happen to either of us, and I think well-intentioned doesn't matter, I'm all about uniting. We can see someone that they're right-wing or left-wing, they're this person. But what do you have in common? So when I get angry at someone, in my mind, I will say, what unites us? What are 3 things I like? Because let's just say it's the one topic that you hate. They might have the 99 other topics that you like. And so I've been trying to, over the year, or maybe a year or two, train myself to see the best in people. And I'm hoping, and I know it's very wanky and I can see you smiling, but I'm hoping something small like that, there are other tools that people might, because we're so quick to divide, and I'm all about uniting, and I am the solution. You heard it. People can flip that,
Yeah, and look, we are all, I try that too. I'm fearful for our species that we don't learn. We just don't learn. That's the problem. I have a friend who's a very right-wing anti-vax guy, hates Daniel Andrews, all the stuff that everyone sane thinks is insane, is my friend. He's pretty nutty. But I've said to him, because a lot of our mutual friends stopped talking to him because of his views, because of to be honest, it's fair enough. He says some wacky things. But I have decided to be his friend. And I actually said to him the other day, I said, I'm going to be the last piece of wreckage you can cling on to if you ever want to come back to reality. I'm going to be the door that Jack and Rose were on at the end of Titanic. If you decide at any point you want to come back and join the rest of us in the real world, we can chat. Until then, I love you. You're my friend. We'll still get coffee. We'll still hang out. Just know that everything you say is insane.
I have a very different approach, so we won't get into that. But I had a friend who, at the time when we had the vote for legalizing gay marriage, and one of my friends was very against it, and I was furious. I'm going to skip a few things because it's a long story. And I decided at the time I don't want to be his friend. And then after a bit of reflection, I realized I don't agree with him. I think that's something that should be allowed. And very long story short, I realized with his information, he believes a certain thing. And with my information, I believe a certain thing. I can try and educate him, or I can actually just try and be his friend and show him love, and hopefully it'll come around. And that has actually changed my perspective, because I don't agree with most people on some topics, but I agree with more topics. So even if someone is the things that you said or other things, I'll try my best not to let that impact, because I think that's actually where the change is. There's not one person I know where I agree with all the topics.
Also, life is not about living in a bubble, or it shouldn't be anyway.
I want to, but I'm just saying I don't know anyone that agrees with me on all my issues.
I don't want to hang out with people that agree with me. I think life is about the exchange of ideas and robust discussions and believing things until they are disproven. And like being challenged in your beliefs is one of the best things someone can do for you.
Yes, so
because otherwise it's dogma. If you're not challenged on your beliefs, then they're not your beliefs, they're someone else's.
agreed. And although I might get triggered and annoyed that someone said that, there was this comedian, maybe it's Brian Callinan, he was saying you need the left, you need the right, because you're going to hear different points of view, and that's where the growth is. And
yeah. I mean, this is an interesting thing I find, just in all walks of life. I was thinking about the other day with sitcoms, like the 3-camera sitcom with an audience does not exist anymore, really. At least in Australia. No one's made one since, I think, like Mother and Son. What now exists are like the dramedies. They're comedies that are like single camera, on location, and they're kind of funny and they're kind of heartbreaking and they're like, there's no laugh track. But my feeling is that those dramedies exist in part in opposition to the old style of sitcom. They exist as like hey, how dumb was that version of doing TV? Here's a new version of TV. What I wonder is, and what will inevitably happen is then a new generation will come in and go, these dramedy things kind of suck. And maybe they'll make the sitcom again. You know, everything is in flux and everything returns to what it once was.
Like an equilibrium of balance.
Yeah, and everything exists in opposition. Most things, at least, exist in opposition to other things. So, like we need each other. We need to be able to talk to one another, and we need to be able to disagree with one another.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying with labels. When we call someone a this or a that, and we all do it, we don't want to hear their opinion. And my challenge to myself and indirectly to my friends, or maybe even directly in the podcast, is to look past that. Because once someone's got a label, you think we know who they are. And you might not agree with the person, and this is where I think intention matters. At the end of the day, everyone I've ever met wants the world to be a better place. We just go about it different ways. And so I'm very strong on, I really don't like your views in this regard, but I can still be your friend.
I think it was Plato, said, no man does what is evil to him. I heard, there was a great comedian, Corey White, who no longer does comedy, but that was one of the things he talked about in his show. And he had a show about growing up in foster care and being abused. But the people who were abusing him believed they were doing the right thing. Wow. And it's true. I mean, there are people like this, but I think almost everyone, no one wakes up in the morning and goes, yeah, I'm a real piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be a piece of shit all day. Everyone's dealing with their own stuff and doing their best.
Yep. Trying to.
And there is, obviously there's scope for punishment and dissuading people from doing things that are, like, I would think objectively heinous. But I think you got to meet people where they are and be like, okay, well, instead of calling you a fascist, whatever, why do you want that? Why are you thinking that way? Why are you behaving that way? Try and understand what motivates them, and maybe you can provide them a way out that isn't violent. Because ultimately, violence is, what do they say? Violence is politics by other means. Yeah. Violence is the last resort when politics doesn't work. Yeah. And so we need to talk to one another.
I agree. And to wrap up that point, what you said is meeting people where they're at. I think that's brilliant, and I think we could all do a little bit more, actually a lot more with it, but I think that's very important. I just want to go back to what you're talking about with moving forward in fear before I forget. How the growth side of comedy. So how do you view your success in terms of, you're talking about incremental little wins along the way, then one day you realize that you're in a different place. Do you track success differently to when you first started?
I don't even know if I have a metric for success now, because if I look at where I am in comedy now, when I started in 2014, 2013 or whatever, if I could have told that version of me, you're going to have played all these comedy clubs, you'll have had this many views online of your comedy, you'll have been to all these different places, you'll have opened for these people, I would have thought, wow, I made it.
Good for you.
And now I'm like, God, I'm broken, I'm sad. It's never enough. I mean, that's the human condition, isn't it?
But is that more expectations? You've reached a certain point and now you want to go to what you believe is the next level?
Yeah. Have you heard there's a term in mountaineering called the false summit?
No.
Where you're walking up a mountain and you go, I'm almost at the top. And then you get there and you realize it was a plateau before the real summit. That's life. It's always going to be there, though. I think this is the Buddhist thing of the nature of existence is the cause of suffering is desire and attachment.
Yep.
And we are always going to be attached to something and desirous of something. Even if you achieve what you want to achieve, there'll be something else. When I was 18, all I wanted to do was kiss a girl. I didn't lose my virginity until I was like 21.
Yeah, I was who could believe that us two would take so long?
And now, it's different. Now I want to have sex with two.
It'll be 5.
I used to literally be like, if I could just have a girlfriend. And now I'm like, now I'm looking at getting married. And I'm like, okay, if I could just have a wife. And then it's going to be, if I could just have kids. If my kids would just get the fuck out of my house. There's always going to be something.
Yes. And what's the relationship with that? Is it punishment or acceptance that there is...
Having a wife?
No, in terms of the growth. Sure, the wife.
Take my wife, please.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think success is really something you should even be aiming for, really, because what is it? It's ephemeral. It has no tangible. It's everyone's version of success is different.
Yep, I agree.
And my version of success keeps changing.
Yep.
I would just like to be able to continue doing what I'm doing for a reasonable amount of money. That would be, that's all I can really say that I want.
That's very interesting, and that's very important because someone's success might be doing 100 gigs and that's it, and then ending there, or just getting up once.
Jermaine Greer once said, she was on some show when they said, oh, you were married for like, I don't know, Jermaine Greer was married for like a year or something. And they said, how's it feel to have a failed marriage? And she said, my marriage wasn't a failure, it was just short.
I love that.
Yeah,
I also hate the term failed marriage, but anyway.
You don't need to look at everything as a zero-sum game. Doing 100 gigs and then not doing any more gigs, that's success if that's what you wanted. And I sometimes think about this, if I stopped doing comedy tomorrow, did I fail at comedy? No, I mean, I had a great time doing it. I still did all these cool things. There is a time and place for everything. Billy Connolly no longer does stand-up because he can't, because he has Parkinson's. Is he a failed comedian now? It doesn't make sense to even think of it in those terms.
How did you get there? What made you think about this?
Just growing. I just age, I think. Just finding a couple of grey hairs and then I'm going to die soon.
I assume you are 30.
I got my hair cut the other day and I had all these grey hairs and I went, oh, I'm going great. And the hairdresser felt bad. He's like, no, they're from a man who was here before. And I'm like, brother, they're mine. I found a grey pube the other day. It's over for me.
It's all down here at the ripe old age of 30.
It wasn't my pube.
Someone else's.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Just
interesting?
on the tram, but...
Wow. Yeah, the tram stories.
Equanimity is a very difficult thing to achieve, I think. I mean, even the concept of achieving it is an oxymoron. You know what I think was actually a really pivotal moment in my life is when I was like 20, 21. I used to smoke a lot of weed with my friends. And I used to kind of get panicked, but I never I was with my friends. So I was I just thought that was what smoking weed was. You just kind of felt shitty and then went to sleep. And then I bought some weed and smoked this joint on my own in like 10 minutes. And I used to buy weed off friends who just grew it. But this thing, whatever I bought was like high quality, crazy. And I went to pieces, basically. I was living with my parents still. And I remember coming out to my mother and my sister watching TV and I was in my underwear, shivering. And I was like, I just smoked a lot of weed and I'm having a very bad night.
Wow.
And they didn't even know I did drugs.
What a way for them to find
out.
out.
I just sat down and watched TV with them. I remember looking at the TV and seeing the faces and being like, I don't know what those are. I didn't know what human beings were. I was like, what is that animal? I've never seen one of those before. I completely lost my mind.
Were they terrified?
No, it's just weed. I mean,
but to see the result that you're in.
You know when you're drunk and then you sober up for 10 seconds and you're like, I'm pretty drunk right now.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah.
just back to being drunk.
Yeah,
I do remember at one point looking at my mum and going, "This could be really embarrassing tomorrow, isn't it?" And she was like, "Oh yeah." But you know what happened after that? I would say it took about 12 months for me to like claw my brain back. I was having panic attacks constantly after that. Literally, like, would just burst into tears for no reason at random times of the day. Like, my brain was just fried. One joint. And literally, my mum was worried I was going to like kill myself. I remember being driven to the emergency room one day just to get diazepam because I just couldn't cope with being conscious. Like, just waking up every morning was extremely traumatic. What it was I had an anxiety disorder. I had anxiety and depression, and I didn't know. I didn't know I had it. And I went to the doctor and the therapist and started talking about it, and he's like, "Oh man, you've clearly got clinical anxiety and have had it your entire life." But I never knew, and it took a drug experience to push me right to the edge of. I was coping with bad mental health.
Yep.
And it took that experience to really push me over the edge into like needing help. But after that, I got on medication, started seeing a therapist, and most importantly, there was a Buddhist temple right down the road from my parents' house, and I used to just walk down there and meditate. And it's one of the best things I ever did. I mean, all the stuff we're talking about now, being mindful of the world and other people's feelings and wishing we could all understand one another more. That's all from that terrible experience I had. If I hadn't had that experience, I would probably just be walking around like everyone else on autopilot.
Yeah. It's a very unique mindset to go through that, and I know you said it very quickly, but I believe you were getting panic attacks every day and sometimes even more, not being able to function.
Yeah, I mean, I literally had a constant stream of adrenaline for like at least a year. I don't really remember much of it. Like when I moved out of home, it was like the first year I moved out of home like soon after that.
Yeah.
That whole year is kind of
Foggy.
Like I remember things, but I just remember being constantly panicked, like pure panic.
It also sounds like, and I'm not taking away from the experience, or I'm sorry if I'm not careful with my language, I think you described it as something like an ego, what was the word? Like death of the ego as well.
Yeah. And funnily enough, there were parts of it that I remember. I remember like lying in bed and just like trying to have one thought. I couldn't do it. I couldn't track the beginning of a thought to the end of it. And just in my mind, it was very strong, maybe it was something more than weed, but whatever it was, I remember seeing, like visualizing my thoughts and seeing them all just swirling around and merging into one another and thinking, oh, that's me. That's actually what I am. It's just a whole bunch of thoughts and experiences constantly in flux.
You reached enlightenment.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, it was a super beneficial experience. I would never do it again.
Yeah, but that's the hardest, toughest experiences. You can thank them, but never again.
Yeah.
That's wild. And so you went on a bit of a journey, and it sounds like you did a lot of introspection. I believe you did meditation. You mentioned that you did a bit of breath work, or you learned to breathe. What else helped on top of what you said?
The monks at that place were really funny. They were English. There's a lot of like white monks now who
really?
found enlightenment, but they're still white.
So, so they can never. Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
Even
I won't see a white monk.
Even Buddha's like, Matt, come on, man. We've got diversity required.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
I had this monk from Liverpool. It was really fun. Monks are really funny because they just say the things that we all know, much like comedy, but without the valence of trying to be socially acceptable. So I remember like one lady was like,
interesting.
what do we do with meditation? How do we get to, what do we achieve with meditation? I remember this Liverpudlian monk going, well, you're going to get great in meditation and you're going to reach nirvana and then you're going to die in a bump matter. We all went, what? He goes, yeah, I mean, even if you nail it, you're going to die.
I like that they just say how it is. Don't really. So what they do they speak.
I think that's just how people who've got a real handle on the human experience do talk, because it's like it's all bullshit anyway. So much of it is bullshit.
I may have gone to the same place. I've gone twice, I believe, but I didn't have that quite profound experience.
You didn't have a monk?
I had someone, but I just thought it was some guy that was an accountant. Then
all you need is love, brother.
Yeah, that's a good one. So you went there a few times. What did anything that spring to mind that helped you?
You know what I think is really helpful, and I think everyone should do, is just realize that you're not your thoughts.
Yes.
It's actually a really difficult lesson to learn if no one ever told you. It's even the language of it is really confusing, because in Buddhism you learn that there is no self.
Yep.
The self is an illusion, but then just the vagaries of the English language mean that you have to talk in an I, me, mine way.
Yep.
You can't be erudite enough to talk about the experiences there's no language for them, is what I'm trying to say, in a wanky way. But knowing that your thoughts are not the gospel truth is something that it never occurred to me before someone pointed it out, where they're like, you're having the thought that blah blah blah, which is actually different to I have the thought I'm panicked right now. That's one way of saying it. Or you could say I'm feeling panic.
Yep.
And that separation is actually super important, because if you're not identical with your thoughts, then you can take a step back and actually view them sort of objectively, or as objectively as anyone can with their own thoughts.
I agree. Very well said.
It's a weird one that the Nazis were so emotional, because German is inherently structured like that. I speak German.
Yeah.
And they say they don't say I am scared, they say ich habe Angst, or I am hungry. I habe Hunger. I have hunger. I have fear. And yet the Germans, famously, super emotional people, started a war, did a lot of crazy shit, should have just been a bit more mindful of their thoughts.
Should have had more Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah. Hitler should have been like, I don't hate the Jews, I have hatred.
Do you do that instead?
No.
You should. I reckon that's a good bit. I've heard people describe it also as a separate entity of thoughts, almost like matrix coding, in that you can pick it, you can choose to look at it, because we have so many thoughts that we're not aware of whatsoever, and you can align yourself with the thought. It's very hard. A
fun thing to do, especially if you're an anxious person, is to count how many times you have the same thought over and over.
Yeah.
I say something in this podcast that I'm freaked out about, and then I go, oh my god, I said this horrible thing in the podcast, and then I think about it again and again and again. If you actually catch yourself and you count it, I remember one time being like, oh my god, I told myself the same thing 100 times today. And if I was friends with someone and I called them 100 times a day and was like, hey, by the way, blah blah blah, after about the 5th time, they're like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why do you keep saying this to me? But because they're your thoughts, you don't notice that you're telling yourself a story. Everyone's telling themselves a story.
Agreed, and to be able to take a step back and realize that you're not that story, it is hard, and I'll give an example of what's worked for me. Have you ever read, I think it's called Big Magic. Big Magic is pretty much how they say it a lot better, where you're not your thoughts, but you can pick the thought, and the thought, you can pick a great idea. It's up to you to be able to choose, and kind of gives tools. For me, if it's from the negative side, or not that I'd ever say this, but let's say I'm a piece of shit. If I can capture that thought, I will repeat it in the moment to myself, the positive version. So my self-talk is really good now, because it's taken many years, because I'm able to, or when I'm able to hear that thought, is I will flush it out with positivity.
Yeah, so I don't do that. I just am amused by negative thoughts. They just make me laugh. I was talking to my
So they don't bump you down, it's just it's funny?
Yeah, I was talking to my therapist today, and I was like, how some people count sheep when they go into bed?
Yeah.
I think of ways to kill myself. And he was like, do you also think of ways to scare your therapist? And I was like, no, dude, it's I'm not going to kill myself, but I just think about it. I'm like, dumb ways to die, drive off the road, jump in front of it. But I just look at it as I don't know, for whatever reason, in my mind, that's a very amusing topic.
And I think, yeah.
Now, if I kill myself, this clip's going to go viral. And everyone's going to go, oh my god, he was telling us the whole time. Why didn't we listen?
I hear you have to be doing. No, not really. But it's also different into what you're saying is, one, you're smiling, and two, the way that you approach comedy. And it's also, how you approach comedy in life is that you're able to talk about these, let's say, darker topics. So it's not actually the same. Like, written down, I remember Jim Jeffries, I know this is a slight tangent, a journalist wrote down word for word what he said. And that translates very bad with Jim Jeffries.
Yeah.
But knowing Jim Jeffries and his style and his comedy is very different. So the way that you are talking about it is from hopefully you're seeing it in a different light.
Yeah, like we have a neighbour who yells at us because we don't park our car properly. So last night I was like, what if I just killed myself in her car and then she has to find my body? That would bum her out. And that would be funny.
Yeah.
I get it. It's not funny for everyone. It's funny for me.
I can laugh at everything.
There's an episode of How I Met Your Mother that has this in it, and I know Dave Hughes has a joke about it, but it's also something, like, I'm very much in love with my girlfriend, and so when I fantasize about other people sexually, I have to kill her first in my head. So now the fantasy used to be, I'm at a bar and a hot girl wants to fuck me, and then I have sex with a hot girl. Now I'm like, she dies of cancer. I go to a bar. I'm still wearing the suit from the funeral. This girl goes, oh, you look really nice. Did you come from a work meeting? No, my wife just died of cancer. Oh, can I buy you a drink? And then we have sex. Now, I'm not actually fantasizing about my partner dying, but that's where my brain goes now. That's what I said to my partner. I'm like, do you want to know how you died tonight? And she's like, go on.
Yes, that's very different.
Yeah.
That's very different to, let's say, the Jim Jeffries on paper, the words, to you're smiling, you're actually in a good mood. And you.
But if someone told you, like, if you didn't know they were a comedian, or studied mindfulness or whatever, if someone said, to get off I have to imagine my wife being dead, you'd be like, I'm calling the cops.
Yes, I'm getting out of here. Hopefully I can run faster than you.
Exactly.
The whole works. So it's an interesting approach. I do recommend.
But this is what I find interesting in comedy is we all have these thoughts all the time.
Yep.
The trope that people say about comedy is, he says what we're all thinking. But like, we are all thinking dark shit.
Yep.
All the time. And then most of us aren't saying it. So it's interesting to say it.
I agree, and also from a comedy perspective, I think, and you're talking about the turns and the hooks and the I forgot what the word is, but that's where you can the tension.
Yeah,
it's a very interesting way of approaching, and I love it. That's also how I write my comedy or screenplays as well. So, what has helped you from having that experience? That is a very, very challenging experience. To see almost gratitude in a sense is very unique, and I think you should be very proud of yourself in that regard. But also just something like doing stand-up, I believe you're doing stand-up, to have a panic attack is a very challenging experience, and now you're having it quite often, and now you still have to live your life. So what did that kind of look like for you, and how did you kind of...
I used to have panic attacks on stage.
Oh, really?
And I'd literally be halfway through a joke and be like, am I speaking English right now? I don't even know what's happening. Your body can cover a lot of it for you.
As in you're going like autopilot, you're in the backseat, yeah.
Yeah, I heard Marlon Brando once said that in one of his films, the whole film is on autopilot. He was a very depressed guy. I don't know. I think life is just about continuing to live, which is not, it doesn't sound like a very philosophical statement.
Yeah.
But if you just keep going, things will take care of themselves, really. And look, that's easy for me to say because I'm relatively able-bodied, relatively healthy in a relatively wealthy country. But, if you just persevere, I think things have a way of sorting themselves out. I
have an interesting theory and I'll explain it in a second. How is your motivation and passion for comedy now since when you started?
I feel a lot freer now because I feel like I just am going to say the things I'm interested in saying. It's funny, like the more success I have, the less successful I feel in that I'm like, I can see opportunities that used to be really far away and they're now pretty close and I'm still not there.
Yeah.
Like I still can't get onto TV, I can't get a manager, I can't do all these other things. And they seem close. I'm like, I feel like I could get a manager. No one seems to be interested. So like that stuff, because it's more tangible, it feels more out of reach.
Oh, interesting. Like you're right there, but it just can't reach it.
Yeah.
But going back to what we were saying, one, I believe you're worthy of all of those things. And I'm not just saying that. there's plenty of people, we've mentioned Luke Kitchell. I've had some people that couldn't get managers, they couldn't thrive, they didn't believe they could thrive in, let's say, the Australian market, and you're going to go back 360, and they then moved to London, or they moved to America, or maybe they changed jobs, or they did something else. They changed their environment so that they could succeed. Because the one pathway, for example, in Melbourne, not to harp on it too much, it's very specific for certain people. And so you have the skills, the talent, it just might mean you have to go another way.
And I got much better at comedy during COVID. My partner and I, she was in America. We got together during COVID. We kind of met. It's a long story, but the point being was that I felt like I got to get out of Australia. I just felt like I was like everyone in Melbourne, just trapped in a box, and it was just not good for me. So I took the JobKeeper money and I went to stay with her for 90 days in the US. And I did some open mic gigs there, nothing paid, American government, I'm fine. But I did just to immerse myself in the American comedy scene. I came back and a lot of people said to me, "Oh, you got a lot better," because it was freeing. It was freeing to not know the rules and to be able to be more experimental and pick up some American influence in the way you do comedy. Like, here's something I didn't talk about ever before I went to the US and watched comedians even. It's you notice Australians don't talk about race unless it's their race.
Yes.
An Indian comic will talk about being Indian, a Pakistani comic will talk about being Pakistani, or an Englishman will talk about being English. But it's very rare to see someone get up and go, "Hey, we've got an Indian here tonight, let me talk to you about India," because everyone goes, "Oh fuck, he's about to be really racist."
Yeah.
Whereas in America, I always say this, it's the one myth America tells itself that is true. America's got a lot of bullshit founding myths, but the one thing they tell themselves that is true is that they are actually a melting pot, in the major cities at least. You go to a comedy club in America, everyone's there.
Yep.
Hispanic, black people, Jews,
God forbid.
dirty Jew.
Yeah.
Everyone's there, and everyone's hanging out,
yeah.
and everyone's sitting. Don't fucking clarify. Don't fucking
That was
clarify.
for you. Everyone knows I'm
You're
Jewish.
terrified. You're terrified of the internet.
No, I'm not scared of that. I that was actually for you, but yeah.
I actually think if I was a dirty Jews, I'd get more love on the internet. To be fair.
Yeah.
But everyone's together. And everyone jokes about one another. It's awesome. You see a black guy go up and you'll be like, "Hey, Hispanic guys, whatever."
Well, yeah.
I was doing there's black gigs in America that are black comedy shows. Everyone's black. And I was getting up and going, "Hey, I'm one of the good ones. I'm Australian. I didn't do anything." They loved it. So when coming back here, I was like, oh, maybe that would be an interesting thing to talk about in an Australian context, is race. As a white person, because there's a lot of inbuilt tension in white people talking about race. And then you find, which is really fascinating, is that people love talking about their culture to you. And they actually will, they'll love it more if you do it than if you're too scared to even mention it. And I did a gig recently in Hobart, and I was like, "Where are you from?" And the guy's like, "South Africa." And I was like, "But you're Indian, aren't you?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that's because there's Indians in South Africa." And you could see all the white people in the corner of the room, like 5 Gs, they're on a rocket going to space, what is he doing? And this Indian guy was like, "How'd you know there's Indians in South Africa? That's awesome." And we talked about it, and it was fun.
Well, you look at Andrew Schultz, for example, and he picks on everyone, and I think it's amazing, and the reception and his audience. And there's another comedian who was kind of the OG Pete. What's his name? I can't remember. And he was known. You get every ethnic group in the world would come.
Russell Peters.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting one, because Russell Peters is a brown guy doing it from a brown guy's perspective.
True.
Andrew Schultz is a New York guy.
I thought, so when I first heard of Russell Peters, I didn't even know what brown was, because I would have been 6. So I went to one of his shows. I only understood half of the comedy, and I was like, this is amazing. There's so many different people. I always thought Andrew Schultz was actually Mexican, and it was
I think people think he's Italian or Mexican, he's got, but it's fun. It's actually fun to be oh, could I be whiter?
Yeah.
Could I be more white? I'm just a tall Caucasian brunette guy, and I'm Indian guy. Tell me about you.
Yeah.
Because the inbuilt tension of that is what's he going to say? Is he going to say something horrible about India? And then sometimes you do say something horrible about India, and Indian dudes are like, yeah, it fucking sucks in India. And then you both have like a thing, and then you can turn on the rest of the audience and be like, hey, we are in on this. It's your fault if you're not in on it. And it's really fun. It's a fun thing to play with.
Yeah.
As long as you're playing.
Yeah, but that goes into my point about well-intentioned, and I know I've spoken about it later.
Can I ask, how long do we have left? Because I need to pee.
So do I. 5 minutes, but let's go to the bathroom.
All right, let's go to the bathroom together. All right, I want to just clarify this for anyone watching. I've had black gunk on my neck the whole time.
I was so embarrassed. I had to get new headphones.
And you were very kind. You were worried I had a skin condition, so you didn't mention it. It's his crappy headphones. So just I don't want this cut out. If you've been looking at this whole time and you've been like, there's black stuff on his neck, it's this man's fault.
I've had them for a long time, but I apologize. I just want to wrap up a few things before.
I want you to cut that and put it at the start of the episode so everyone knows.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we'll be picked up on that angle.
You don't think so?
No.
All right, you're going to have to watch it back and tell me.
I can put it in my introduction.
Very kind of you, though, not to be like, what's going on with your neck?
I was actually thinking at the start, I don't remember you walking in with this, but what could it have been?
Yeah, developed black mold.
Yeah, fuck. I just want to wrap up a few things before we go, then we'll have to do a part 2 because there's so much to discuss. Back to your journey with the panic attacks. Where are you at now? And you gave a few tools. Is there anything else that has helped you?
You know what? I still have panic attacks. I just think that's part of who I am. You know what I was thinking? I've been listening to a podcast. It's called Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem. And it's just talking about the history of Israel and Palestine. It's very good. And it talked about all the pogroms against Jews. And I was thinking, like, I wonder if that's the Jewish part of me that's panicked. Because you think of, like, if you got thousands of years of people trying to kill you, it probably would be beneficial to evolve, like, a trait of, like, oh shit, there's something
Always looking to behind your back.
Yeah. And I was wondering, like, I wonder if the anxiety and panic in me is just the Jewish part of me.
The Jewish,
yeah.
What did Buddy say to you when you?
Well, I'm not that, like, I wasn't raised Jewish. My father's side of the family, my great-grandfather was a Jewish comedian, like a very famous Jewish comedian. My mother's side of the family, if you go like 3 generations back, her grandmother, so it's down the maternal line too, was Jewish, but I think converted.
Yep.
Sarah Abraham, sounds Jewish.
That is very Jewish.
Anyway.
That's like silver, gold, Steinberg, Steen.
So when I opened the body, I went in the green room, and the first thing he says is, he just goes, "You're a Jew?" And I went, "Kind of." And I told him my family history, and he goes, "I'm sorry to say, you're a Jew."
Hilarious.
I'm sorry. That's what they should do.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's so much I can say about that. And next time we chat, we'll talk about your doco and very interesting there, but I'll leave it there. I reckon before we go, we'll do a rapid fire segment.
Okay, cool. Jews and rapid fire, never a bad thing on the internet.
Israel Palestine, true. Do not answer.
Pro, but I'm not going to tell you which one.
Good. What makes you smile?
What makes me smile? You know what makes me smile? Being up really late at night and watching like YouTube videos. There's like, if it's like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I will just hysterically laugh at anything.
You've hit that certain point.
I'm like sleep drunk and everything's funny at 2 o'clock in the morning.
I won't comment on them because I'll derail them. You said that you bought an engagement ring. You woke up first thing this morning and bought an engagement ring and then went back to bed. That's a very interesting sentence.
First thing in the morning for a comedian means 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Bought an engagement ring, my partner and I, we're going to get married.
Congratulations.
She knows, it's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and then came back home and I was like, I'm still really tired, I'm going to go to bed. And she was all bubbly and like,
oh, so you proposed today?
Well, no, we don't have the ring yet, so I'm going to propose later.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's very common these days.
Yeah.
So I'll paint the picture. She is ecstatic.
Yeah, she's like, we're getting married, and I'm like, that's awesome, I'm going to bed.
Yeah, like, I'm really tired.
Yeah, and then I woke back up and she's like, hey, and I'm like, I have to go to do a podcast.
I'm so sorry. So I've ruined your pre-engagement.
Yeah, it's nothing. We've I bought a ring. That's all.
Oh, you said you ordered one? Or was it like what,
Ordered.
Amazon?
There's a guy who's making it.
Oh, very
A
impressive.
ringsmith.
A ringsmith. We did all of
If
that.
only there was another word for that, like jeweler.
Yeah.
Do you think the Jew and jeweler is somehow connected?
I actually was thinking about this the other day with no research and never having this topic of conversation with anyone. Maybe.
Yeah, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we potentially put something horrible out there, but
Yeah. In light of recent developments overseas, he's now just an alert.
You used to be a busker.
Used to be a busker, yeah.
Was singing ever in the works? Did you ever think you could be a professional singer?
I mean, I still like playing music at home, and like I sometimes record songs at home, like original things, but I just like don't do anything with it.
And would you put it out?
Nah, probably not. I find songwriting very
Cathartic.
weird. There's a vulnerability to it that I don't like. There's something that's like I find really embarrassing about being like, I put together these words and they rhyme and they're about my emotions. Like that scares me so much more than just getting up on stage. And
You could put it out under a fake account.
I could, but I won't.
We're putting it out there. If as your missus, actually,
I don't think she even knows I do that.
oh, I'm gonna find her and tell her. I think that's cool. I planted the seed. What was the weirdest encounter you had as a busker, or something that springs to mind?
Oh man, okay.
Okay, fuck.
So I forgot about this, and then I was talking to someone the other day, and they're like, you know, when you just like a memory alert, you're like, oh, where was that in my head? I didn't know I had that. I remember, like, I was like 13, and I'm playing music, and a guy comes up and he goes, "You're really good," and I go, "No, thank you."
Oh god.
And he goes, "I'm a musician. We should play together." He's like a 50-year-old guy.
Oh
I'm like,
no.
"Oh, that's really nice, but you know, I'm busking." And he goes, "Well, I got like my guitar. I live down the road. You should come back to my place. I'll like take you there now. We can play." And I was like, "No, I don't really think I'd like to do that." And he goes, "Oh, what? It's not like I've got a rope in there to tie you up."
Holy shit!
And I
You
went-
said it was.
I went, "Do you have rope?" And he went, "Whoa," and just like ran off basically. And then I forgot about that. And then I was like telling my mum, I was like, "Oh yeah, there was that time that pedophile tried to abduct me." She's like, "Oh, what? Tried to what you?"
Oh my god. You are.
I forgot. That's how little it like registered at the time.
But you're a young boy as well.
I didn't even realize that I could have been on the news.
I literally just wrote, "You avoided being on the news." This
Yeah.
could have been the ticket to stardom. Wow. Yes. Okay. That is a brilliant story, and I really do hope that you put something out. It doesn't have to be under your name. I had a guest maybe a year ago. They didn't want to put out their music under their name, and I understand, so they put it under another name, and the one thing that they released went very well. So that's a challenge to you. Last two questions. Any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
If you want to do something new, and it would really depend on what they want to do. It's like, do you want to be a serial killer? Don't. My advice would be don't.
Don't do that, please.
My advice would be get into open mic comedy. It's very similar.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never been a person that struggled with that. It's really never occurred to me to be worried about trying something different or new. Like before I did comedy and I was like writing for like school, like university newspapers, sometimes I wanted to like interview someone. There were a couple of times I like wanted to interview like pretty well-known people. So I just wrote to them. Yeah, when I was in like year 10, I did a class on the 1960s, like a history class, and they asked us to write a piece about the Beatles. So I wrote to Yoko Ono and I was like, can I interview you? And her assistant wrote back and was like, "Look, Yoko can't just do any, she's busy. But thank you for writing to her, and like your idea for your project sounds really cool, and I just want you to know Yoko like did read your letter and liked it."
That's awesome.
And then I printed that off and put it in. I got it. Like, it's never occurred to me not. I just tend to be I'm not a risk averse person in that way.
Yeah.
I'm always excited by things. I think the trick is to be excited by not knowing how to do something. Like, you've got to welcome the idea of failure and actually like be interested in failing. Be like, seeking out failure is something that most people don't do. But like, I think you should run towards the things you're scared of rather than away from them, because generally, I think if you're scared of something, if there's part of you that wants to do it and part of you is scared of it, that means it has some kind of emotional value to you, and that you should do it. Like, there are things that just scare me that I'll never do. Like, I'll never go skydiving. I think it's stupid.
I've done that. I wouldn't do it again.
Yeah, it's a waste of time. And also, if you die, I don't feel bad for you. You jumped out of the plane.
Yeah,
What did you think was going to happen? Right? So I will never do that because I'm scared of it. But I also have no desire to do it. But if I had a desire to do it, I would book a class.
Very unique. You can be a co-host because you said it better than I've said it in all these podcasts. I appreciate it. Last question before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you, or is there anything you want to tie up?
Well, I thought we were going to talk about Judaism.
Yeah.
So it's actually interesting that we didn't, because I feel like I get drawn into talking about that a lot.
I have a whole page on it, and we'll do it. But yeah.
Well, I mean, my questions would be more for you. It's like, because you grew up Jewish, didn't you?
Yeah.
Did you go to like shul and Hebrew school and all that stuff?
I went to a Jewish school in the later half, or middle half onwards.
Yeah.
I did not go to shul unless it was like Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that answer your...
Yeah, so for me, I got none of that.
Yeah.
In fact, like my parents are raised Catholic. We eat Christmas, Easter, all that stuff. And so like I like to talk to people about whether they think I'm Jewish, because I'm like, I don't really think I'm that Jewish. I call myself Jewish, and my girlfriend's like, you're not Jewish. My girlfriend's mum literally went, you're not a Jew. You're not much of a Jew.
Not much of a Jew.
She's from Frankston. And so like I'm perpetually fascinated by that part of my ancestry and culture, and I kind of feel a connection to it, and then I feel like illegitimate for feeling a connection to it, which I've heard is very Jewish.
Yep.
So these are all the things I'm perpetually fascinated by. I can have the same conversation 10 times in a row, and I always get something new out of it.
Oh, interesting. We can continue that part too. You know, like Tim Watley from Seinfeld. Do you watch Seinfeld?
Yeah.
The dentist?
Well, right. This is like literally, I'm like, is that what I'm doing? Am I Jewish for the joke?
Yeah. No, but you know, if you want to be Jewish, you're Jewish. I think it's a topic of conversation that...
Well, it's an interesting thing about Judaism as a religion is that it's like you get denied if you try to convert. They say no.
3 times.
3 times, right? And like, this is a big, like it's a thing in Jewish culture where you're like, I'm Jewish. And like, no, you're not.
But on the 3rd time, you're Jewish.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in that part of it. I think I feel such a connection to like the history of like humor and storytelling and anxiety and lactose intolerance. But like, I feel I'm like, God, I'm like a natural fit for this group of people.
Yeah, I love that. And we'll talk about your doco next time we chat. Before we go, how can people follow you and keep up to date with you?
I like how we just talked about how terrified I am with the internet. You know, like, anyway, where can they follow you? At David Rose Comedy on Instagram, TikTok, David Rose Comedian, Facebook, davidrosecomedy.com. I don't have anything. I have a she website. There's nothing on
No,
it.
I like it, and people can check nudes, and they can...
Yeah, I do have a tab on there that says naked pictures of David.
I think it's 20 times and it wasn't working.
Yeah, that's fine. Most of the traffic on the website goes to that.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Which is really an indictment on my comedy. Because there is a video, there is like a thing that says videos of David performing comedy.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I think those are all the things. And then like if you're in Asia, do you have listeners in Asia?
Yes.
If you're in Singapore, I will be there in December performing at the Lemon Stand Comedy Club and Comedy Masala. And that will be in December. And that will be, I think, like the 16th and the 20th or something like that of December. And then if you're in Taiwan or Hong Kong, I'm going to be just going there because I'm interested.
That's very cool.
I want to see them before, World War III.
Well, we won't put that out there.
So if you're in either of those places and you know things I should do, let me know.
Those will all be in the episode notes below, so they can contact you there as well. Thank you so much. This was great. I've written one of the most amount of points I've ever gone through, so I'm excited to do this again as well. And this was, a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love how David talks about welcoming failure. Although it can be scary to entertain the idea, David insists that there is an emotional value in the pursuit of the goal. In a world where failure is terrifying to many, it is refreshing to hear how David has embraced it and sees it as a valuable part of thriving in life. David says, be interested in it, seek it out, run towards the thing you're scared of. David reminds us that it's no big deal, but your life will be better off for at least trying. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. Failures, repeated failures, are finger posts on the road to achievement. One fails forward towards success. C.S. Lewis. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.